welcome to Making Known the Unknown. I'm your host, Tina Tarryk, and with me today are Reverend Carl Hewitt, medium and founder of Gifts of the Spirit Church in Chesterfield, Connecticut. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you.
And Sidney Schwartz, teacher and Bible researcher from Hackensack, New Jersey. Welcome, Sidney.
Hi.
And both of these gentlemen are authors of the book, My First Encounter with an Angel, Revelations of Ancient Wisdom, of which our show endeavors to cover, because there is quite a bit of very interesting research that both Reverend Hewitt and Sidney Schwartz have uncovered to put together this book. Today's series is Gifts of the Spirit, Part 3, and when we speak of gifts of the Spirit, we speak about things that are often, we are understanding, referred to in the Bible as gifts that people possess and that they actually use to communicate with Spirit. And there are many different types of gifts of the Spirit which we have been discussing. And on today's show, what we are starting out with first is a quote from someone who possessed one of the many gifts of the Spirit. And Sidney would like to read that quote.
Well, this quote that I found is talking about the fact that the Bible is really a book of psychic history. And it records the history of many mediums for about 1,000 years, going from Abraham all the way through Jesus. And this is really not new information because Reverend Lyman Beecher, who lived between 1775 and 1863, he was a reverend in Litchfield, Connecticut, here in Connecticut, and he was the father of Harriet Beecher Stowe. And he said this quote, he said, "Take the spiritual phenomena out of the Bible and you won't have much left that is of any value excepting the lids." And he said this in 1879. So people who really understand the Bible understand that the Bible is really a history book of psychic phenomena, or the gifts of the Spirit. And so we wanted to tell you this, but basically many people don't understand what happened, don't understand this concept. And to talk more about that, Reverend Hewitt was going to talk about his experience at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Yeah, it was back in the 70s that somewhere in my travels I read for one of the anchor people at WCSC Charleston, and she wanted me to appear on the show, and I did. And of course there was an awful lot of people in that city that was very interested in the subject. And so I had a open invitation to be on their radio station or the TV station. And I did quite a bit of work there, and that signal goes all the way to Jacksonville, Florida, as well as up to Myrtle Beach. And at the end of my stay there, I was on tour for 3 weeks, I think it was, and there were some people in Myrtle Beach that came down to see me and wanted to know if I would go to Myrtle Beach on my way back north and appear there, and I agreed to, but yet I was on my way north at the time. So they rented the ballroom at the Breakers Hotel, which was right on the ocean, beautiful place, and the ballroom was the top floor. It was the very top of the building. It was actually beautiful. And so it was in the papers. There was a great deal of publicity about it. And so when I arrived there, these people met me, and when we went over to the hotel, I was surrounded by police, and they would not even allow me in the building, because this is something I have been telling people for so long, that there's been a cover-up dealing with this work. Now all these people had been hearing me and watching the broadcast from Charleston, and when I went to Myrtle Beach, they wouldn't even allow me to present any of this to the people. So to the viewers of this program, I want you to think for yourself, who was covering this up? Who was it at Myrtle Beach did not want these people to witness anything dealing with the phenomena of the gifts of the Spirit? And so I left there looking back with a lot of almost bitterness, because, and I started thinking of the great person, the teacher of 2,000 years ago, where he told his students, he said, when you come to an area of people and they will not allow you to teach them what I've taught you, shake their dust off of your clothes and go on to someone else. As far as I'm concerned, he was telling the hell with them if they don't want to listen, you see. And so that night in Myrtle Beach, when we had no other choice, we all gathered at these people's house, the people that sponsored it. And something happened that night that I will never ever forget. I stepped on a spike in their yard, but didn't even feel it. It went right up through my foot, and it was 1.5 inches above my shoe. But I felt as if I had stepped on a big wad of gum or something like that, and it felt strange. There was no pain, absolutely no pain at all. So when I got into the house, you know, we were all talking about what was going on there. The police were there, and they wouldn't allow me to speak and all of this. And so I had put my foot over my knee, and I was trying to take my shoe off. I couldn't get it off, realizing that there is the head of, I guess that's what you call it, the head of this spike that I was trying to get my fingers under to get it out, and I finally pulled it out. Well, the woman of the house, she started screaming. She wanted to take me to the hospital or take me to a doctor right away, and I said, there's not a bit of pain. There's not a bit of pain. And so when I pulled it out, there was a little tiny bit of watery blood. And I heard a voice that says, there will be no pain. And I laid the nail, no, it was not a nail, it was some sort of a spike. I laid the spike down on the table there. To this day, I don't know what they did to it. And the Spirit told me that 2,000 years ago, there was a great teacher that came to the world to teach the gifts of the Spirit, and because he was such a threat to the priests that were there already, that they had him nailed to the cross. Well, we all know who that man was, because that's all he taught was gifts of the Spirit, see?
So let me understand this. You were on your way, by invitation,
Yes.
to share your gifts of the Spirit with other people, a group of people.
Absolutely.
And it was canceled.
It was canceled.
They wouldn't allow you to go any further.
The town fathers actually passed a law that day which forbid psychics or mediums to work on any place in Myrtle Beach.
Yeah.
And when was this?
1979.
That's amazing. And then, so what you ended up doing is meeting with the friends who invited you privately at their home.
Went there to talk it over because they were so shocked. These are members had been living there for a long time, and they were absolutely shocked beyond anything you can imagine.
And they saw this spike going through your foot.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you must have been just as amazed as they were
well,
once you saw it.
It didn't bother me that because there was no pain there, absolutely no pain at all. And then 2 days later, I couldn't even find the scar. You see, those in the world of spirit have been trying to get the message out to us in so many ways that he really taught, Jesus I'm talking about, he really taught the gifts of the Spirit, but in his day, the only thing he could do to get the message across was create the phenomena of which they all call miracles, you see. But I want people to understand that everybody has a certain potential of being an instrument of the Spirit. However, I would certainly caution the viewers of this program not to believe everyone is really genuine, just as there were false prophets in those days, there are false prophets today, and a heck of a lot of them.
So now, even though you were denied your opportunity to show to a large group of people the gifts of the Spirit, in fact, you did demonstrate that, using yourself, really, in the process.
Yes.
So now you've also talked about that there are many, many people throughout history who've had gifts of the Spirit. We were referring to
this book, the Bible.
Okay.
This book is a book of psychic phenomena. Remember, people, the word psychic means soul and mind, but yet the word has been tainted, so I don't use it very much. Okay. The word has been tainted, and a lot of people are viewing this program. They don't even realize that the word psychic means soul and mind. And it is something that I was fighting against. And the Voices of Spirit want me to teach this. They want me to enlighten the people because the world is in ignorance. It's in absolute ignorance.
Now, Lyman Beecher, a man you just quoted,
Right.
from 100+ years ago, his connection with understanding the Bible, where does that come into all of this?
He was a congregational minister, which meant that he was a Protestant minister. So he was a mainstream Protestant minister who understood the fact that the Bible is a history of the gifts of the Spirit. Because that's basically what he said. Because if you take all the gifts of the Spirit out of here, the only thing that's left is a very thin, long list of man-made laws that the priests created. And that's really all that would be left.
So now, in today's show, one of the types of gifts of the Spirit that we're going to be pursuing, which I believe runs right in line with Mr. Stowe and maybe a close relative of his, I understand,
Yes.
Is the gift which is referred to as automatic writing. And for those of you who are not sure what automatic writing means, I am using Reverend Hewitt and Sidney Schwartz's book, My First Encounter with an Angel, actually to bring forth the definition of automatic writing. And I will read that to you now. Automatic writing happens when a medium allows spirit to use his or her hand to produce a written image or to draw a picture. The medium needs to put himself in a relaxed, meditative state, erasing all conscious thought from his mind. Spirit then places his hand over the medium's hand and begins to write. It is identical to the way, and this is your example in the book, Sidney, a kindergarten teacher places her hand over her student's hand. Everyone could remember that from when they were very young, to help form a letter correctly. The medium has no conscious knowledge of what is being written or drawn, and the speed of the writing or drawing can be incredibly fast. That's phenomenal. I personally don't know of any examples of anyone who could do that. I don't think that we really, in our day-to-day lives, really hear about that. Can you maybe share an example of somebody from the Bible that you've researched that maybe possessed this gift?
Well, it's interesting you talk about that, Tina, because a lot of the Bibles don't really mention it. When you get into the latter part of the Bibles, when it talks about the books of the prophets, it's a lot of times in some of the books it says in some of the Bibles that the word of the Lord came by the hand of the prophet so-and-so. And by the hand would indicate that this was through automatic writing. Now most of the Bibles leave that phrase by the hand out. And it was only about 3 or 4 prophets where that phrase is in. But Moses is actually one of the more famous prophets of the Bible, or mediums of the Bible, who used the gifts of automatic writing. Because everybody knows that Moses at one point went up into the Mount Sinai to spend 40 days and 40 nights fasting and communing with Spirit, or the Lord as it says. And you have to remember that when Jesus came to the earth plane, he taught that Spirit is God, or God is Spirit, in John 4:24. So we can interchange the word God and Spirit at will. So Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and he was communing with Spirit, and in the process of doing that he was given the 10 Commandments. And it says in the Bible when he came back down from the mountain that he held the 2 tablets of testimony in his hands, and it was written with the finger of God, or by the finger of God. So that phrase would indicate that it was done with automatic writing, because obviously God didn't come down with a chisel and was chiseling away. So he was helping Moses inscribe those tablets with his rules. And yeah.
That's a good example. Thank you. We all know about the 10 Commandments. We all know that they were chiseled on rock, but never have I understood that this is automatic writing and that it's an actual gift to the Spirit. So I'm guessing, is this another example, correct me if I'm wrong here, of covering up what was intended to be taught to the people?
Well, the point is, Hosea said it very nicely when he was accusing the priests of not teaching the people. The fact is that if you understand the sciences and how the science of psychic phenomena works, then when you go back into the Bible, this stuff starts to hit you right in the face, because it's all there. The words are there, but since people don't understand the phenomena, they don't understand it. I remember years ago, I was living in Boston at the time, and I went to a movie theater and I watched the movie Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And as I was in there, I saw everybody was fidgeting. You know, they thought the movie was kind of slow-paced and boring. The whole place was like very uncomfortable, including myself at the time. And then later on, once I started to attend Reverend Hewitt's classes and found out that story is really an allegory for psychic phenomena, and in fact there was a lot of psychic knowledge in it, we watched the movie again, and it was fascinating. I was glued to the screen to watch it. So the whole thing is you're understanding yourself and how you view it. When you have the understanding to go in there, then you start to see the phenomenon and you start to understand it. Where if you don't have that understanding, it goes right over your head.
The teachings that I share with people does not come from a book. It comes from the other dimension, because I have the gift of clairaudient, which means clear hearing. But if we go back, for instance, Jesus, he came to the world to teach the gift of the Spirit, and he was killed by the priest because he was a threat to them. And when he went into the other dimension, he had to find a person back on the earth plane, physical being, and he chose Saul, which the church changed his name to Paul, and then they canonized him as a saint. And all the information that you find in the book of Corinthians is really coming from Jesus, but coming through the medium, you see, coming through Saul. And he, first of all, he said that you have two bodies. You have a physical body, you have a spirit body. And when the physical body dies, it gives birth to the spirit body instantly. This is why we go on living. But we're living in a body that's invisible to the people in a physical body. See?
Tina, I'd like to read to you from the Bible, because Jesus also did automatic writing.
He did?
Yes, he did. He did it when the Pharisees were accusing the woman of adultery. And it says in the Bible, and this is John chapter 8, it says verse 6, and they were posing this question to trap him so they could have something to accuse him of. Jesus bent down and started tracing on the ground with his finger. So he bent down and he put his finger in the ground, and he was let Spirit do the writing, because he didn't know what to say himself. So he was doing automatic writing. And then it says, and when they persisted in their questioning, he straightened up and said, let the man among you who has no sin be the first to cast a stone at her. And a second time he bent down in the ground and wrote on the ground. So he was doing automatic writing. That's how he knew how to answer that question.
Absolutely.
Now, we've all heard that statement from the Bible. That's very common. But why has it never been discussed as automatic writing?
Let me go back.
Why is this not well known?
Okay, let me go back to Charleston when I was down there for a long time, months, and the people would call in. The station phones would be jammed, and they would call in, and many of the people said, "We have never had anyone explain this to us before, but the church don't explain it. No one explains it. They don't want us to know."
The thing is that the Bible is and religions don't want you to understand psychic phenomena, because in that case you won't follow their religion. This is part of the reason there was a conflict between the priests and the mediums going all through this book. The priests didn't want the people to really understand it, because they wanted the people to come to them with their sacrifices. So they wouldn't do that if they kept them in ignorance.
So who wrote the Ten Commandments? Plain and simple.
Spirit did.
Spirit did.
Yes.
So those are actual communications from Spirit.
Right.
Okay. All right. We've talked about biblical figures. We've talked about Mr. Beecher, Lyman Beecher. Evidently, he has a very famous daughter, Harriet Beecher Stowe.
Yes.
Harriet Beecher Stowe.
And obviously, she was an author and a writer, and
but what you don't realize was she was also a medium.
She was
also a medium.
She was a medium. She wrote the book Uncle Tom's Cabin through the gift of automatic writing, and that book was a key book. It was a very crucial book at the time, because it was enlightening the people as to the treatment of the African Americans and how bad slavery was. And Spirit wanted to see this institution ended, so they used her as the instrument to sit down and write this story, so that it would become well known. That book became an instant bestseller.
We've all known about that book.
First of all, Spirit told me that Uncle Tom himself was a real person. He was an Afro-American, and he lived in his own cabin, and there was a lot of problems because the white people were trying to kill all the black people. And after he died a natural death of pneumonia. And after he died, from the other dimension, he used this woman, he practiced with her using her hand until she relaxed and let go, and then he wrote that book himself using her body to do it.
So I guess my amazement here is that potentially any author out there could really be a medium and using...
They won't admit it.
Really?
Yes.
They could all be doing automatic writing.
You know,
Or poets, or singers, or performers.
how about magicians?
Or magicians.
David Copperfield is one of the greatest mediums on this planet.
Okay.
And there's another medium that came into the area. What was his name? In New London.
Coles.
Huh?
Coles.
Yes. His name was Cole.
His last name.
And it was at the New London High School. I went there. He was so nervous because I was in the audience because he could see the light around me. This goes back to that old story years ago, takes one to know one. A medium sees the light around another medium, and you see, he won't mention the fact that he's gifted. He makes everybody think it's illusion or it's magic. Well, I got news for you. He was a great medium.
Well, the cat's out of the bag now.
Andre Coles was his name, okay. Andre Coles.
Wow.
And he hasn't come back yet because that night that we were there, and I had all my class go, and when we left there, we went to, I believe we went to Lum's for coffee after that. And there were so many of us, they put us on the far side of the restaurant. And I was over there against the wall, and straight in front of me was the entrance to the door. And all of a sudden, that door opened, and guess who was standing in the door? He himself was standing in the door, and his group. You see, he became so nervous because he saw me over there and the light around me that he didn't know what to do. And about that time, the maitre d' came and seated them, but he was nervous. He was nervous that I might blow the whistle, Well, I did. I told my people, I says, he's just a great medium. That's all there is to it.
Tina, by profession, I'm a school librarian. And last December, I went to a library conference, and part of the presentations, some of the children's authors were speaking to us. And this one author got up there talking about the books that she wrote, and she came to this one, and she clear out said, "I didn't write this book." And she totally worked in a different method. She did it on the computer, which she never writes that way, and she did it all in one evening. It was automatic writing. She didn't understand the process herself. She didn't know she was doing automatic writing, but because I understood psychic phenomena, I understood that that's how this book came into being.
So Spirit is trying very hard, it appears, in many different ways, through many different ways, to communicate to us.
Yes.
All over the world they're doing that, every language on the planet. They know that we've been misled. They know that we've been lied to. So they're working very hard to get across.
Is there anyone else that you have run into in your studies? There's somebody I think you might have mentioned in this book that does automatic writing, but the name escapes me right now.
Yes, the medium's name is Matthew Manning. He is a British medium. He's written many books. One of the books that he has written is called The Link. And he has done a lot of automatic writing. In fact, that was one of the first gifts of the Spirit that he explored. He's now a very powerful healer. But he initially, during his course of being in school, Spirit was trying to get his attention, and there was a lot of poltergeist activity. Spirit was moving a lot of objects around the rooms and things. And he suddenly got the idea that if he would focus on trying to do some automatic writing and to use that energy, perhaps the poltergeist activity would stop. And he actually would sit down and take a pen and just kind of empty out his mind. And what was happening is, at first, scripts were being produced. His hand would start to write, and he would write all these. He would write messages, and eventually, what happened was that he started doing drawings too, because it's the same process. An artist would, instead of a writer coming through, an artist would take hold of the hand and start to draw. And he simply, it's kind of like it has a mind of his own, and he's just doing this. And many famous artists have worked through him. Dürer is one, and Picasso, and many other people have done this.
So Matthew Manning is a young man who's alive today.
Yes, he is.
About 48 years old. I went to 3 of his seminars when he was touring this country. And he's fabulous. He really is. But he's devoting the energy to healing, nothing else.
Right.
Did he actually, in those seminars, draw anything? You said he does drawings of famous artists?
Not before us, but he has done, he has made a video of his work, and we have a clip for you that we brought with us that we'd like to share.
I was writing an essay, and I had my hand just poised slightly above the paper, and I was thinking of what to write next, because I couldn't think of anything. And I must have gone off into a daydream, and my hand suddenly went down, and I started scrawling across the paper in an illegible and incoherent writing which didn't make any sense. And that surprised me, and I didn't know what had happened. And so I ripped up the piece of paper, I think probably because I was frightened more than anything else. And so I thought, well, I'll see if I can produce some more writing like that again, and it might stop it. And so I concentrated very hard with a plain sheet of paper and a pencil, and tried to make this writing happen again. And I think I was probably concentrating too hard, because nothing happened at all. And I couldn't produce any writing, and so the activity went on. And then I tried it again, and again it didn't work. And so I was so desperate for it to work that I just kept on doing it and doing it. And I think on about the third or fourth attempt, I managed to do it again, and it seemed that I had to empty my mind as completely as I could. And then, when my mind was almost completely empty, my hand would start moving, and it would write in a handwriting that wasn't my own. And I kept doing this automatic writing, and this was eventually what stopped the poltergeist activity. Well, after about 2 or 3 years, the writing became easier and easier to do, until eventually I could more or less just sit down and do the writing at will, although I couldn't always get who I wanted to write for me. And then the writings, or the messages, began to come in different languages, foreign languages, and as I can only speak French, I think this surprised rather a lot of people, especially when I received messages in Arabic and Russian. And the other person that interested me was somebody called Robert Webb, and I had a lot of writing from this man. And we then went to the Public Records Office in Cambridge and found that this man had actually lived in this house between about 1680 to when he died in 1733. Over the last few years I've had literally hundreds of messages in automatic writing from Robert Webb, and the last one of which I received this afternoon actually while we were filming. I wrote down, what do you think of all these lights that are in your house? He replied, such pretty lights as I never see in mine house. And such a pretty light on mine stairs. Oh, for some pretty light in mine bedchamber. Oh, and such many persons in mine house. So I then reminded him that it was not his house, but our house. Never have I heard the like of such nonsense, he said. Off with you. And then he signed his name very angrily, Robert Webb, in big scrawly writing. Well, as well as the automatic writing that I do, I also get a lot of automatic drawing. Many of these are signed by well-known artists, like Dürer, Picasso, Rowlandson, Klee. I don't always get drawings, of course, from people whose work I like. I get a lot of drawings from Picasso, and I don't like his work, and I don't like him doing drawings through me. I find him a very aggressive artist, and I rather feel he likes to dominate me. And somebody like Dürer, who is another artist who I've had a lot of drawings from, is completely the opposite. Dürer is much more delicate and gentle than Picasso, who has on occasions even smashed my pens. Beardsley is an interesting artist. When he draws, he always makes a mistake and then will proceed to black it over or turn it into something else. Of course, not all the drawings are signed by well-known artists. A lot of them are unsigned, and there are also many with signatures of artists whom we have not yet managed to trace, including the drawings of birds, which I most like doing. These drawings always start from the centre and then work out towards the edges. I always find it interesting to do these drawings because I never know until the picture is finished what I'm going to draw. It's a bit like having a magic painting book where you just put on the water and the picture appears. Only here, I just start drawing and I don't know what I'm going to draw. And then the drawing just appears. They're also drawn at a speed which is far faster, I'm sure, than most normal artists can draw. The drawing I did for this film took only about 7 minutes.
Thank you for sharing that video clip with us, Sidney. That was very, very interesting on Matthew Manning's abilities with automatic writing. It's very interesting to see the different languages that he wrote and the different artists. I know that I was convinced, and I can't wait for our viewers to see this, to see what they think about automatic writing. Of course, automatic writing is one of the many gifts of the Spirit, and we will be wrapping up our show on Gifts of the Spirit Part 3. We hope you will join us next time. And thank you for joining me, Reverend Carl Hewitt.
My pleasure.
And Sidney Schwartz.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us.